On this frigid Christmas Eve, snow blanketed the streets like a silent witness, muffling the laughter from distant festivities while amplifying the loneliness of those left behind. Yet even in the darkest alley, where the wind howled through cracks and survival was a daily battle, miracles could still bloom, not in bursts of grandeur, but in quiet, transformative moments. A chance encounter, a kind gesture, or an unexpected gift. And so, beneath the faint glow of a flickering street lamp, the story of Eric and Marie began, not with joy or certainty, but with a small package left by an unseen hand. Inside, it lay the spark that would reignite their lives and remind the world that even the smallest light could pierce the deepest darkness. The bitter chill clawed at every exposed patch of skin, seeping through Eric Harris's frayed coat as he huddled closer to the flickering flames of a small fire. His wife, Marie, shivered beside him, clutching a threadbare blanket around her shoulders. The wind howled through the Chicago alley, carrying with it the distant sound of Christmas carols from streets they dared not tread. "Do you remember our first Christmas together?" Marie's voice trembled, but her attempt at cheer cut through the oppressive silence. Eric managed a faint smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the fire. "You mean when we burned the turkey and had to eat canned beans instead?" Marie laughed softly, the sound fragile yet determined. "And you still claimed it was the best meal you ever had." "Because it was with you," Eric replied, his voice low, the weight of years and hardships etched into every syllable. Their shelter, a makeshift arrangement of discarded cardboard and tarps, was a stark contrast to the twinkling lights of the nearby skyscrapers. This was their reality, a life stripped down to survival, where even a fleeting moment of warmth felt like a luxury. As they sat in the cold, a distant rumble broke through the night. A delivery truck, its headlights cutting through the falling snow, came to a halt at the edge of the alley. "Who's delivering packages at this hour?" Marie whispered, her voice a mix of curiosity and caution. Eric tensed, instinctively shielding her with his remaining arm. The other lost years ago, in a war that had taken more than just his limb. The truck driver stepped out, depositing a large, carefully wrapped package near their makeshift shelter, before disappearing into the night without a word. Marie hesitated, her wide eyes darting between Eric and the package. "Should we open it?" Eric frowned, the scars on his face deepening as he studied the box. "It could be a mistake. Maybe it's meant for someone else." "Who else is out here?" Marie countered gently. Maybe it's for us." Against his better judgment, Eric nodded. Together they approached the package, their breaths visible in the frosty air. Marie untied the ribbon, her fingers trembling, not just from the cold, but from the fragile hope that stirred within her. Inside, they found a set of high-quality art supplies, brushes, tubes of paint, a pristine canvas, and a handwritten note. Eric's brow furrowed as he picked up the note, the words carefully penned in elegant script, "For the artist whose story deserves to be told. Merry Christmas, Secret Santa." Marie's eyes welled up as she looked at Eric. "Art supplies," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and confusion. "Eric, do you think—" He stared at the canvas, his fingers brushing its smooth surface. Memories flooded back, of the hours he'd spent painting during rehabilitation, the solace he found in colors and strokes when words failed him. But that was another life, a distant dream buried beneath years of struggle. "It's been too long," Eric muttered, shaking his head. "I wouldn't even know where to start." Marie placed a hand on his arm, her touch firm yet tender. "You start by picking up the brush," she said softly. This might be a sign, a second chance." Eric hesitated, the weight of doubt pressing against the flicker of hope in his chest. He had stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. But as he looked into Marie's eyes, brimming with unwavering belief, something shifted within him. Slowly he reached for the brush, its wooden handle familiar yet foreign, in his calloused hand. The canvas stared back at him, blank and full of possibilities, as if daring him to tell his story. And so, beneath the faint light of a flickering street lamp, on a cold Christmas night, Eric Harris began to paint once more. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cracks in their makeshift shelter, bathing the alley in a soft, cold glow. Eric sat cross-legged on the frozen ground, the canvas propped against an upturned crate. His brush hovered hesitantly, poised to strike, but never moving, as if the blank surface mocked him with its emptiness. Marie stirred beside him, her makeshift pillow, a bundle of old clothes. She stretched, wincing as the cold bit at her joints. Her gaze fell on Eric, his shoulders hunched in silent battle. She rose quietly, wrapping her threadbare scarf tighter around her neck, and knelt beside him. "You've been staring at it for hours," she said gently, her voice carrying a warmth that cut through the chill. Eric sighed, his grip tightening on the brush. "I don't know where to start, Marie. It's like I forgot how to do this." She leaned closer, placing her hand over his. "You don't have to know where to start. Just start." Eric glanced at her, the flicker of doubt in his eyes, gradually giving way to something softer. He dipped the brush into a small tin of black paint and pressed it to the canvas. The first stroke was shaky, uneven, but it cut across the white, like a trail through untouched snow. As the hours passed, the canvas began to take shape. Marie watched in silence, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and relief. For the first time in years, Eric seemed alive. By mid-afternoon, Eric stepped back to examine his work. The painting depicted a soldier, his lone arm shielding a small child, as chaos erupted around them. The colors were bold, almost defiant, shades of red and gold, intertwined with shadowy blues and blacks. The soldier's face, a blend of anguish and determination, mirrored Eric's own inner struggle. Marie approached cautiously, her hands clasped tightly together. When she saw the finished piece, her breath caught. "Eric," she whispered, her voice trembling, It's beautiful." "It's raw," Eric replied, his tone dismissive. "Unfinished." Marie shook her head. No, it's real. It's you." He turned to her, his expression a mix of vulnerability and skepticism. "Do you really think people would see it that way?" She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his cheek. "I see it that way, and I think others will too." That evening, as the city settled into the quiet of Christmas night, a visitor arrived. Linda Grayson, a local journalist, wandered into the alley with her camera slung over her shoulder. She had been documenting homelessness in Chicago for months, her articles bringing attention to those the city often ignored. Linda spotted the painting first. The bold strokes and haunting imagery drew her in, and she crouched to take a closer look. "Did you paint this?" she asked, her voice cutting through the stillness. Eric, caught off guard, nodded. "Yeah." Linda straightened, her eyes sharp and inquisitive. "This is incredible. What's your name?" "Eric Harris," he replied, his tone guarded. "And this?" Linda gestured toward the painting. "What do you call it?" "Guardian of Hope," Eric said after a pause. Marie stepped forward, offering a hesitant smile. "It's inspired by his time as a soldier. He used to paint before, but it's been years." Linda's gaze softened as she looked between them. "This isn't just a painting. It's a story." The following week, Linda returned with news that left Eric and Marie speechless. She had spoken to the owner of a small community gallery, and they had agreed to showcase Guardian of Hope in an upcoming exhibit. Marie clutched Eric's hand tightly as Linda explained the details. "It's not a big gallery, but it's a start," Linda said, her enthusiasm infectious. Eric's initial excitement quickly gave way to apprehension. What if people don't like it? What if they think it's just charity? Marie squeezed his hand, her eyes fierce. "This isn't about them, Eric. It's about you. And your story deserves to be told." Linda chimed in, her tone firm. "Art isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about making people feel something. And your work does that." The days leading up to the exhibit were a flurry of activity. Eric worked tirelessly, pouring his energy into refining Guardian of Hope and starting new pieces. Marie, ever his anchor, supported him in every way she could, from gathering supplies to offering words of encouragement during moments of doubt. On the morning of the exhibit, Eric stood before the painting one last time. His reflection stared back at him through the protective glass, a reminder of how far he had come. "You ready?" Marie asked, standing beside him. Eric took a deep breath, his hand tightening around hers. "As ready as I'll ever be." As they walked toward the gallery, the cold wind nipped at their faces, but it couldn't extinguish the warmth that had begun to grow in their hearts. For the first time in years, they weren't just surviving, they were living. Eric carried Guardian of Hope carefully, the weight of the canvas a tangible reminder of the burden he was finally learning to share. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Their story was just beginning. The small community gallery was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the art world Eric had once dreamed about. It was nestled in a quiet corner of the city, its facade unassuming and its interior modestly adorned. But to Eric and Marie, it might as well have been the Louvre. The scent of fresh paint and varnished wood greeted them as they stepped inside, clutching the canvas of Guardian of Hope. The gallery manager, a kind middle-aged woman named Rebecca, approached them with a welcoming smile. "You must be Eric Harris," she said, extending her hand. Eric nodded, shifting the canvas nervously under his arm. "Yes, ma'am." Rebecca gestured toward an empty easel in the center of the room. "That's your spot. We're excited to have your work here." Marie helped Eric position the painting on the easel, her hands steady, despite the slight tremor of nerves in her voice. "It looks perfect," she said, taking a step back to admire it. Eric glanced around the room. Other artists were setting up their pieces, intricate sculptures, vivid abstracts, and portraits so lifelike they seemed ready to step out of their frames. He felt a pang of insecurity, his grip tightening on the edge of the easel. "Do you think it's enough?" he asked, his voice low. Marie turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "It's more than enough. It's you." As the doors opened to the public, a small crowd trickled in, their footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. Eric and Marie stood to the side, watching as people stopped to study the painting. An elderly man in a tweed jacket leaned closer, adjusting his glasses. "Powerful," he murmured, nodding approvingly. A young woman snapped a photo on her phone, her lips curving into a thoughtful smile. "It's raw," she said to her companion. "You can feel the pain and hope in it." But not all feedback was positive. A middle-aged man in a tailored suit scoffed loudly. "It's amateurish," he said to the woman beside him. "Emotional pandering at best. This isn't art, it's a sob story." Eric flinched at the words, his chest tightening. Marie reached for his hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Ignore him," she whispered. "I can't," Eric replied, his voice barely audible. "What if he's right?" The man's voice carried across the room. "Honestly, What's the point of putting this here? It cheapens the entire exhibit. Before Eric could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. I disagree. All heads turned toward the back of the room, where a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped forward. His presence was commanding, his deep voice resonating with authority. It was James Carter. James approached the painting, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. He stood in silence for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back, before turning to the man in the suit. You see a sob story, James said evenly. I see resilience. I see a man who has lived through unimaginable pain and found a way to express it through art. That's not weakness. That's strength. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. James turned to Eric, his expression softening. You're the artist, aren't you? Eric nodded, his voice caught in his throat. James extended his hand. I'm James Carter, and I think your work is extraordinary. James's public defense of Guardian of Hope shifted the atmosphere in the room. Patrons who had previously dismissed the painting began to take a second look, their expressions tinged with curiosity and respect. Rebecca, the gallery manager, approached Eric with a beaming smile. This is incredible, she said. You've made quite an impression tonight. But Eric's mind was spinning. The man who had just defended his work wasn't an ordinary patron. James Carter was a renowned philanthropist and art collector known for supporting underprivileged talent. Why did you do that? Eric asked James later, his voice hesitant. James smiled. Because your story matters, and because I see potential in you, Eric. With the right support, you could go far. That night, as Eric and Marie walked back to their shelter, the weight of the evening settled over them. The praise, the criticism, the unexpected encounter with James Carter, it was almost too much to process. Eric stopped suddenly, turning to face Marie. Do you think I can do this? Really do this? Marie placed her hands on his shoulders, her gaze steady. Eric, I've always believed in you. And now, someone like James Carter does too. Isn't it time you started believing in yourself? Eric looked at her, the doubt in his eyes slowly giving way to a spark of determination. The chapter ends with Eric sitting by the fire, the canvas of Guardian of Hope propped up beside him. He sketches on a new piece of paper, the flickering flames casting shadows across his face. Marie watches him from a distance, her heart swelling with hope. For the first time in years, the future feels less like a burden and more like a promise. The morning sun filtered through the cracked windows of the shelter, casting faint beams of light onto the worn floor. Eric sat at the makeshift table, his head bent over a fresh sketch. The aroma of instant coffee filled the air, a humble luxury Marie had managed to secure from a neighbor. Eric, Marie called softly, interrupting his concentration. He glanced up, his expression weary but softened by her presence. Marie held an envelope in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. This was just delivered. Eric frowned. Delivered? Here? She nodded, handing it to him. The envelope was thick, its weight and texture unlike anything they'd ever received. Eric turned it over, his eyes catching the embossed return address, the Whitney Museum of American Art, New York City. His heart raced as he opened it, revealing a letter printed on crisp stationery. Marie leaned over his shoulder, her breath hitching as she read aloud. Dear Mr. Harris, it is with great enthusiasm that we invite you to participate in the upcoming Whitney Biennial as a featured artist. Your painting, Guardian of Hope, has been selected for its exceptional narrative power and emotional depth. A grant of $5,000 is enclosed to assist with travel and preparation. We look forward to showcasing your work to a national audience. Sincerely, The Whitney Biennial Selection Committee. Marie let out a gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Eric, this is real. You've been invited to the Whitney Biennial. Eric stared at the letter, the words blurring as tears welled in his eyes. They want me, he whispered. A one-armed, homeless man with no formal training? Marie knelt beside him, her hands clasping his tightly. They don't care about any of that, Eric. They see your talent, your story. This is your chance. But doubt crept into Eric's mind. He pulled away, pacing the small room. What if they're wrong? What if I'm a fraud? I'll embarrass myself, and you. Marie stood, her voice firm. You've spent years proving to yourself that you can survive. Now it's time to show the world you can thrive. Don't let fear steal this from you. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Linda Grayson, the journalist, was the first to arrive at their shelter, her camera in hand. This is incredible, she said, snapping photos of Eric and his painting. The Whitney Biennial is one of the most prestigious art events in the country. You're going to inspire so many people. Their neighbors gathered that evening for an impromptu celebration. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who often shared her canned soup with them, presented Eric with a scarf she'd knitted. It's not much, she said, her eyes glistening, but I want you to have something warm for New York. Tyler, the young boy who often played near their shelter, handed Eric a small drawing of a stick figure holding a lantern. This is you, he said proudly. You're the guardian of hope, just like your painting. Eric's voice broke as he thanked them, realizing for the first time how deeply his story had touched those around him. The bus ride was long and uncomfortable, but the excitement outweighed the discomfort. Marie gazed out the window, watching the landscape shift from snowy fields to the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan. As they stepped off the bus, the city's energy hit them like a wave. Horns blared, people rushed past, and lights flashed from every direction. It was exhilarating and overwhelming all at once. Welcome to New York, Marie said, squeezing Eric's hand. James Carter was waiting for them outside a sleek black car, his charcoal gray suit, a sharp contrast to their thrift store coats. He greeted them with a warm smile. You made it, he said, shaking Eric's hand. I'm glad. The art world needs to see what you've created. The Whitney Museum loomed before them, its modern architecture both imposing and awe-inspiring. As they entered, Eric felt like an imposter in a world of polished floors and whispered conversations. The exhibition hall was a sea of creativity, vibrant abstracts, thought-provoking installations, and sculptures that seemed to defy gravity. And there, in the center of it all, was Guardian of Hope. Marie's breath caught. It looks perfect, she said, her voice trembling. But Eric's nerves were frayed. He overheard snippets of conversations. Who is this Eric Harris? A homeless veteran? Interesting angle. But is it real art? The doubt gnawed at him until James appeared at his side. Eric, James said firmly, you belong here. Let your painting speak for itself. Throughout the day, Eric and Marie met curators, patrons, and fellow artists. Some were genuinely curious about Eric's story, while others dismissed him with polite indifference. One artist, a young woman named Sophia, approached them with a wide grin. Your painting, she said. It's like a punch to the gut, in the best way. It made me feel something real. Her words buoyed Eric's spirits, reminding him why he painted in the first place. As the exhibition drew to a close for the evening, Eric and Marie stood before Guardian of Hope, taking in the sight of their work, displayed in one of the most prestigious galleries in the world. I never thought we'd be here, Eric admitted, his voice filled with awe. Marie smiled, her eyes shimmering. And this is just the beginning. But their journey was far from over. The next chapter would test their resilience in ways they never imagined. The bus's brakes squealed as it pulled into the Port Authority terminal, its fluorescent lights illuminating the faces of tired travelers. Eric and Marie stepped off, clutching their modest bags, the cold New York air biting through their thin coats. The city buzzed with energy, its towering skyscrapers glimmering in the night like silent giants watching over the streets below. Marie took in the scene, her wide eyes reflecting the twinkling lights of Times Square in the distance. "This place, it's like another world," she whispered. Eric nodded, though his stomach churned with apprehension. He felt the weight of their journey pressing on his shoulders. "It's overwhelming," he admitted. "But we're here. That's what matters." The couple followed James Carter's instructions to a modest hotel he'd arranged for them. The taxi ride through Manhattan was a blur of honking horns, flashing billboards, and the hum of countless conversations. Marie leaned her head against the window, mesmerized by the grandeur of the city. Inside the hotel, their room was small but clean, a far cry from the drafty shelter they'd called home for so long. Marie let out a soft laugh as she ran her fingers over the crisp white sheets. "I can't remember the last time we slept in a real bed." Eric placed his bag down carefully and sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze distant. "This isn't just about us anymore, Marie. They're expecting me to prove something. To prove that this," he gestured to his hands, "is worth noticing." Marie knelt before him, her hands gently cupping his face. "Eric, you've already proven it. You don't have to be anything more than who you are." The next morning, they ventured out to explore the city before their scheduled meeting with James Carter. Walking through Central Park, the snow-covered pathways and bare trees offered a brief respite from the chaos. "Look," Marie said, pointing to a young couple ice skating on the frozen pond. "They look so happy." Eric smiled faintly. "Reminds me of us, back when life felt simpler." Their walk took them past bustling markets, where vendors called out to passers-by, and elegant storefronts that displayed items far beyond their reach. At one corner, a street musician played a soulful melody on his saxophone, his battered case filled with a few crumpled bills and coins. Eric paused, reaching into his pocket for spare change. "He's got talent," he said, dropping a few coins into the case. The musician nodded his thanks, his music shifting into a livelier tune as they continued on. By afternoon, they arrived at James Carter's office, a sleek building with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The receptionist greeted them warmly and led them to a spacious conference room where James awaited. "Welcome," James said, his commanding presence softened by a genuine smile. "How are you finding New York so far?" "It's incredible," Marie replied. "But it's a lot to take in." James nodded, gesturing for them to sit. "I understand. This city can feel like a beast at first, but it's also a place where dreams can come to life." He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Eric. Inside were details about the Whitney Biennial, along with a schedule of events and a list of media outlets expected to cover the exhibition. "Your painting, Guardian of Hope, is already creating a buzz," James said. "People are intrigued by your story, Eric. They want to know the man behind the art." Eric swallowed hard, the magnitude of the opportunity sinking in. "I just hope I'm ready," he admitted. "You are," James said firmly. "Remember, your story is your strength. Lean into it." The day of the exhibition arrived, and Eric and Marie found themselves standing outside the Whitney Museum. The building's modern facade was both imposing and awe-inspiring, a stark contrast to the humble spaces where Eric's art had been created. Marie adjusted Eric's tie, a second-hand piece she'd found at a thrift store. "You look perfect," she said, her smile radiant. Eric took a deep breath, his hand tightening around the strap of his canvas bag. "Let's do this." Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Artists mingled with patrons, critics, and curators, their voices blending into a symphony of excitement. Eric's Guardian of Hope stood prominently among the works on display, its bold strokes and emotional depth drawing curious glances. As they moved through the gallery, Eric overheard snippets of conversations. "It's raw, but does it have the technical skill? Interesting backstory. But is it art or just sentiment?" Marie noticed his shoulders tense and slipped her hand into his. "Ignore them," she whispered. "Your work speaks for itself." But the doubts gnawed at Eric until James approached, his voice steady and reassuring. "Come with me," he said, leading them to a group gathered near Guardian of Hope. "This," James said, addressing the crowd, "is Eric Harris, the artist behind this powerful piece. His story is one of resilience, courage, and the unyielding spirit of hope." The room fell silent as James continued, his words cutting through the skepticism like a blade. "Art isn't just about technique, it's about connection. And this painting has connected with more people than most works ever could." Eric met the gazes of the crowd, his initial apprehension replaced by a flicker of confidence. A young woman stepped forward, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Your painting," she said softly. "It reminded me of my brother, who served in Afghanistan. Thank you for creating something so real." Her words pierced through Eric's doubts, grounding him in the reason he'd started painting in the first place. Marie squeezed his hand, her smile radiant. "See? They see you, Eric. The real you." As the evening wound down, Eric and Marie stood side by side, gazing at Guardian of Hope. The journey to New York had been daunting, but it was only the beginning. "We did it," Marie said, her voice filled with pride. Eric nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "And we're just getting started." Their story had taken a bold new turn, but the challenges ahead would test their resilience and redefine their purpose. The Whitney Biennial was alive with energy. The grand hall gleamed under the brilliance of chandeliers, each sparkling crystal casting a mesmerizing glow over the polished marble floors. Patrons in finely tailored suits and flowing evening gowns roamed the gallery, their conversations blending into a low hum of cultured anticipation. Amidst the grandeur, Eric and Marie Harris entered quietly. Eric clutched his canvas bag tightly, his shoulders tense beneath the weight of the moment. Marie walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, an anchor of support. "Your painting," Marie whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's standing here because of you. Remember that." Eric managed a small nod, though his heart thundered in his chest. Across the room, Guardian of Hope stood prominently displayed on an easel, draped in soft lighting. The painting's powerful imagery, a one-armed soldier shielding a frightened child amidst chaos, immediately commanded attention. As the first wave of patrons approached, Eric stood nearby, observing their reactions. A group of elegantly dressed guests stopped in front of the painting. "It's bold," one man said, tilting his head as he studied the strokes. "But does it belong here?" Another woman, adorned in pearls, scoffed softly. "It's moving, yes. But is it technically refined? It feels amateurish." Marie's hand tightened around Eric's arm as she heard the words. She leaned closer, whispering, "They don't understand yet. Give them time." Then a younger man stepped forward, his eyes lingering on the soldier in the painting. I don't know about technique, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But this feels alive. It's real. Eric's breath caught. For the first time that evening, he felt a sliver of validation. A hush fell over the room as Sebastian Monroe, a renowned art critic, known for his sharp tongue, approached the painting. His tailored suit and silver-rimmed glasses gave him an air of authority, and the crowd parted instinctively to let him through. Monroe studied Guardian of Hope in silence, his eyes narrowing as he took in the brushstrokes, the composition, and the story it told. After what felt like an eternity, he straightened, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. This piece, he began, his tone clipped, relies heavily on emotion to make up for its lack of technical sophistication. It's a touching story, perhaps, but sentimentality cannot replace true artistry. The words struck Eric like a physical blow. His jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Marie stepped closer, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Don't let him get to you, Eric. He doesn't see what I see." Before Eric could respond, James Carter stepped forward, his commanding presence immediately drawing the crowd's attention. Dressed in a sleek charcoal suit, James exuded confidence, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs. "I disagree, Mr. Monroe," James said, his tone steady but firm. "Art is not solely about technique. It's about connection, about the stories it tells and the emotions it evokes." James turned to face the crowd, his gaze sweeping over them with quiet intensity. Guardian of Hope is more than just a painting. It's a testament to resilience, to the strength of the human spirit. Eric Harris didn't create this piece to impress critics. He created it to share a piece of his soul with the world. The room fell silent, Monroe included. James's words carried a gravity that silenced skepticism, shifting the atmosphere from judgment to reflection. As the tension began to dissipate, a woman's voice broke through the quiet. "He's right," she said, stepping forward. It was Diana Ellis, a journalist known for her powerful storytelling and her advocacy for social justice. Diana's presence was magnetic, her words commanding attention as she addressed the crowd. "I know the story behind this painting," she began, her voice resonant with emotion, "because I lived it." All eyes turned to her as she continued, her gaze locking onto Eric's. "My son is the boy in this painting, and Eric Harris is the man who saved his life." Gasps rippled through the room as Diana recounted the events of that fateful Christmas Eve, painting a vivid picture of Eric's selflessness and bravery. Her words brought the painting to life in a way that no critique ever could, and by the time she finished, many in the audience were visibly moved. The crowd's murmurs took on a new tone, one of admiration and respect. People who had dismissed the painting moments earlier now leaned in closer, studying the details with fresh eyes. A young woman approached Eric, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for your courage, both on the battlefield and here tonight." Eric felt his throat tighten, his voice failing him. He simply nodded, his gratitude evident in his expression. Marie stepped beside him, her smile radiant. "They're starting to see you, Eric," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The real you." Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin, James found Eric and Marie standing quietly near the painting. He approached them with a warm smile. "You held your own tonight," James said, clapping Eric on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Eric shook his head, his voice low. "I don't know if I belong here, James. This world, it's not mine." James's expression softened. "Eric, the art world isn't just about galleries and critics. It's about stories, about showing people something they've never seen before. Your story belongs here, because it's real, and that's what makes it powerful. As the evening drew to a close, Eric and Marie stood side by side, looking at Guardian of Hope one last time before leaving the gallery. The night had tested them, but it had also given them a glimpse of what was possible. Marie leaned her head against Eric's shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to be okay," she said. Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the painting. "Yeah," he replied, his voice steady. "We are." The journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, Eric felt a flicker of hope, a hope that his story, and the stories of so many others, could finally be heard. The gallery was abuzz with quiet murmurs as Diana Ellis, the celebrated journalist, stood before Guardian of Hope. The elegant room, with its gleaming chandeliers and marble floors, now held its collective breath. Diana's presence exuded authority, her calm yet poignant demeanor drawing every eye in the room. Marie gripped Eric's hand tightly, her heart racing. She whispered, "This is it, Eric. They'll finally understand." Eric nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the floor. The weight of the evening pressed heavily on him, but Diana's unexpected arrival ignited a flicker of hope. Diana cleared her throat, her voice rich and measured, as she addressed the crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I didn't plan to speak tonight, but seeing this painting, I couldn't stay silent." Her gaze moved to Eric, her lips curling into a soft, grateful smile. "You see, this painting isn't just a work of art to me. It's a moment frozen in time, a moment that saved my family." The crowd leaned in closer, their interest piqued. Diana took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she continued. "Last Christmas Eve, my son and I were in a place we never imagined we'd be, on the streets, cold and hungry, searching for shelter. It was a night I'll never forget, not because of our struggles, but because of the man standing here tonight." She turned to Eric, her eyes glistening. "Mr. Eric Harris." Diana began recounting the events of that fateful night. Her voice wavered as she painted a vivid picture of the chaos and despair. "The truck came out of nowhere," she said, her hand instinctively clutching her son's shoulder. "Its tires screeched against the icy pavement, barreling toward us. I froze. All I could do was scream and hope it would stop." Her voice cracked with emotion. But it didn't. And that's when Eric stepped in. Without hesitation, without a thought for his own safety, he threw himself into harm's way to save my son. He didn't even know us, yet he risked everything. Gasps rippled through the room as Diana's words sunk in. Patrons exchanged glances, their initial skepticism giving way to awe. Diana's son, a small boy with bright eyes and a shy smile, stepped forward. He clung to his mother's hand, but looked up at Eric with unmistakable admiration. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," he said, his voice clear and sincere. "You saved my life." The gallery, once filled with hushed judgment and critique, now brimmed with palpable emotion. A young woman wiped tears from her cheeks. An older man nodded solemnly, his eyes fixed on Eric. Marie whispered to Eric, "Look at them. They see you now. Not just your painting, but you." Eric swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He lifted his gaze to meet Diana's, his voice quiet but steady. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said humbly. "No," Diana replied firmly. "You did what many wouldn't. And now, through this painting, you're reminding the world of the humanity we often forget." Sebastian Monroe, the critic who had earlier dismissed Eric's works, stood silently in the back of the room. His sharp features were softened, his arms crossed as he studied Guardian of Hope with newfound appreciation. Slowly he stepped forward, the crowd parting to let him through. "I must admit," Monroe began, his tone measured, "I may have been too quick to judge." He turned to Eric, his expression sincere. "Your technique may not align with traditional standards, but your art has something far more valuable. Heart. It moves people. And isn't that what art is truly about?" The room erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite, measured clapping of earlier. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and unrelenting. Overwhelmed, Eric stepped forward, his voice trembling as he addressed the crowd. "I never imagined I'd be here tonight," he began. "For years, I painted in silence, not because I thought anyone would see my work, but because it was the only way I knew to keep going." He glanced at Guardian of Hope, his expression softening. "This painting isn't just a story about me. It's about all of us. About the moments when we feel lost, and the small acts of kindness that help us find our way again." Tears streamed down Marie's face as she watched her husband. She had always known his strength, but seeing him share it with the world was a moment she would never forget. As the gallery began to empty, Diana approached Eric and Marie, her son by her side. She extended her hand, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. You didn't just save my son. You saved me, too." Eric shook her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "It was never about being a hero," he said softly. "I just wanted to help." Diana smiled. "Well, you did. And now, through your art, you're helping so many more." She hesitated for a moment before adding, "If you ever need someone to help share your story, I'd be honored." Marie beamed, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Miss Ellis. That means more than you know." As the night wore on, Eric and Marie stood together outside the gallery, gazing up at the city lights. The air was crisp, but the warmth of the evening lingered in their hearts. "We did it," Marie whispered, leaning against Eric. He nodded, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Yeah," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "But this is just the beginning." Behind them, Guardian of Hope remained on display, its bold strokes and vivid colors shining brightly. A beacon of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human connection. The train pulled into Chicago's Union Station, its brakes screeching as the steel beast came to a halt. Eric and Marie Harris stepped onto the platform, their breath visible in the icy winter air. The familiar chill of their city greeted them like an old adversary. Though the weather remained harsh, there was a new warmth in their spirits, a sense of purpose that had been absent for years. Eric carried a small suitcase in one hand, his prized paintings carefully packed inside. Beside him, Marie held a folded flyer advertising the Whitney Biennial. The edges were worn, evidence of how often she had held it in her hands, a tangible reminder of the extraordinary journey they had just completed. "I never thought I'd be glad to see this place again," Eric admitted, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Marie smiled softly. "Home is still home, no matter how cold it gets." As they walked through the city's streets, the familiar sights of Chicago unfolded around them. The bustling markets, the towering skyline, and the quiet alleys where they had once sought refuge. Eric's eyes lingered on the faces of the people they passed, the street vendors braving the cold, the children chasing after stray snowflakes, and the homeless bundled in threadbare blankets, huddled in doorways against the wind. "They're still out here," Eric murmured, his brow furrowing. Marie nodded, her expression somber. "That could still be us," she whispered. Eric paused, turning to face her. "Maybe it's time we do something about that." Marie looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" He held up the flyer, its bold text announcing the success of the Whitney Biennial. We've been given a platform, Marie. People are listening to us now. What if we use that to help others, to give them the same chance we got? Marie's eyes lit up with understanding. You mean like a community center? For art? Eric nodded. A place where people like us, people who've been overlooked, forgotten, can find hope again. Through painting, sculpting, music, whatever helps them feel alive. The idea took root quickly. Within days, Eric and Marie began sketching plans for what would become the Hope Art Center. They envisioned a space where the homeless, veterans, single parents, and struggling artists could come together to create and heal. Marie reached out to James Carter, who had become both a benefactor and a friend. In a heartfelt phone call, she explained their vision. James's deep, steady voice resonated with enthusiasm. Eric and Marie, this is exactly what the world needs. Count me in. I'll fund the initial costs and connect you with the right people to make this happen. With James's support, the couple began searching for a suitable location. After weeks of scouting, they found an abandoned warehouse in the heart of the city. Its cracked windows and peeling paint hinted at years of neglect. But to Eric and Marie, it was perfect. A blank canvas waiting to be transformed. Word spread quickly about the Hope Art Center, drawing attention from unexpected places. Former neighbors like Mrs. Jenkins and young Tyler arrived to lend their support. Linda Grayson, the journalist who had first documented Eric's story, offered her skills to promote the center and rally the community. New faces joined as well. Sarah, a single mother who had once been a talented sculptor, rediscovered her love for art. David, a disabled veteran inspired by Eric's journey, volunteered to teach others how to paint. Rosa, a retired teacher, offered free art lessons for children in the community. Each volunteer brought their own story, their own struggles, and their own unique contributions to the center. Transforming the warehouse into a vibrant community space was no small feat. Eric and Marie worked tirelessly alongside the volunteers, painting walls, repairing floors, and salvaging furniture from thrift stores. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Eric paused to admire the progress. The once empty walls were now adorned with colorful murals, each one telling a story of resilience and hope. He smiled, turning to Marie. It's starting to look like a home. Marie, her hands smudged with paint, grinned. That's because it is. For so many people, this will be the first home they've had in years. Despite their progress, the center faced significant financial challenges. The initial funding from James Carter had covered the basics, but maintaining the space required more resources than they had anticipated. Marie spent hours drafting grant proposals and organizing fundraisers. Linda Grayson used her connections to secure donations, while Sarah and David hosted art workshops to raise money. However, the center's bank account remained precariously low. Eric's heart sank every time he glanced at the financial reports, but he refused to let his doubts show. We'll figure it out, he told Marie, though the weight of uncertainty lingered in his chest. Just when things seemed bleakest, an unexpected opportunity arose. A local news station, impressed by Linda's coverage, invited Eric and Marie to share their story on a primetime segment. The couple hesitated at first, unsure of how they would be received. But as they sat in the brightly lit studio, surrounded by cameras and microphones, Eric found his voice. The Hope Art Center, it isn't just about art, he explained, his tone earnest. It's about giving people a reason to believe in themselves again. It's about showing them that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. Marie added, art saved Eric's life, and now it's saving others. We just want to keep that light shining. On a crisp spring morning, the Hope Art Center officially opened its doors. The event drew a diverse crowd: families, veterans, local artists, and city officials. Eric stood at the entrance, greeting each visitor with a warm smile. Inside, the walls were lined with paintings, sculptures, and photographs created by the center's participants. Each piece told a story of struggle and triumph, of pain and perseverance. As the day unfolded, Eric and Marie watched with pride as their dream came to life. Children laughed as they painted bright, abstract shapes on canvas. Veterans shared their experiences through intricate drawings. Single parents found solace in sculpting, their hands shaping clay into symbols of hope. As the sun set over Chicago, casting a golden glow over the city, Eric and Marie sat together in the center's small courtyard. They were surrounded by the hum of life, laughter, conversation, and the gentle scratch of brushes against canvas. Marie rested her head on Eric's shoulder, her voice soft but content. "We did it," she whispered. Eric smiled, his gaze fixed on the mural they had painted together on the courtyard wall. It depicted a soldier and a nurse standing side by side, holding a lantern that illuminated the darkness around them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning." The Hope Art Center, now a beacon of light in its neighborhood, quickly became a sanctuary for those seeking refuge from life's harsh realities. The walls, once bare and cracked, now brimmed with vibrant paintings and murals, each a testament to the resilience of its creators. The center hummed with life, children laughing, adults quietly working on sculptures, and veterans sharing their stories over coffee in the communal kitchen. Eric and Marie Harris were the heart of this sanctuary. Eric spent hours mentoring young artists, teaching them not just about technique, but about the power of storytelling. "Every stroke has meaning," he would tell them. "Every color, every line, it's part of your story." Marie, ever the nurturer, oversaw the day-to-day operations. She coordinated art supplies, scheduled workshops, and ensured that no one left the center hungry. Together, they had built something extraordinary. Despite the center's success in transforming lives, financial strain loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Utility bills piled up, and the cost of art supplies exceeded what they could afford. Even with the initial funding from James Carter and donations from the community, their bank account dwindled rapidly. Marie sat at the kitchen table late one night, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating the financial statements spread before her. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion etched into her features. Eric walked in, his steps hesitant. "How bad is it?" he asked, his voice low. Marie sighed, pushing the papers toward him. "We're running out of money, Eric. If we don't find a solution soon, we might have to shut down." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Eric clenched his jaw, his gaze falling to the table. "We can't let that happen," he said firmly. "This place means too much, not just to us, but to everyone who walks through those doors." As if financial challenges weren't enough, the center also faced resistance from some members of the community. A local business owner, Mr. Richard Caldwell, expressed his disapproval during a town hall meeting. "This art center is nothing but a drain on our resources," Caldwell declared, his voice sharp. "What has it really accomplished? It's just a place for vagrants and drifters to gather." Marie, who had attended the meeting to seek community support, stood up, her hands trembling with both anger and determination. "With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The Hope Art Center has given people a reason to believe in themselves again. It's not just about art. It's about survival, about dignity." Eric, seated beside her, added, "We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for understanding. Come visit the center, see the work we're doing. Talk to the people whose lives have been changed. Their words were met with a mix of applause and murmurs. Caldwell remained unconvinced, but others in the room nodded in agreement, offering their support. Determined to keep the center alive, Eric and Marie decided to organize a fundraiser. They envisioned an event that would not only raise money, but also showcase the incredible talent of the center's participants. "Let's call it Art for Hope," Marie suggested during a brainstorming session. "We can auction off paintings, sculptures, and even offer live performances." Linda Grayson, the journalist who had been documenting their journey, volunteered to spread the word. "I'll get the story on every local news channel," she promised. James Carter, always ready to lend a hand, offered to sponsor the event. "I'll cover the venue costs and bring some of my friends. Let's make this big." The weeks leading up to the fundraiser were a whirlwind of activity. Participants at the center poured their hearts into their creations, each piece a reflection of their struggles and triumphs. Sarah, the single mother, sculpted a powerful piece titled Unbreakable, depicting a mother and child intertwined in an unyielding embrace. David, the disabled veteran, painted a hauntingly beautiful landscape of a battlefield bathed in golden light, symbolizing hope amid devastation. As the event approached, Eric began to doubt himself. "What if no one shows up?" he confided to Marie one evening. "What if it's not enough?" Marie took his hand, her eyes filled with unwavering belief. "Eric, we've already done the impossible. People will come. They'll see what this place means, just like we do." The Art for Hope fundraiser was held in a beautifully renovated warehouse downtown, its industrial charm offset by strings of fairy lights and vibrant artwork displayed on every wall. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as guests arrived, their curiosity piqued by Linda's compelling news coverage. Eric and Marie stood at the entrance, greeting attendees with warm smiles. Among the crowd were familiar faces, Mrs. Jenkins, Tyler, and even some of the skeptical neighbors who had once doubted the center's purpose. James Carter took the stage to deliver a powerful opening speech. "The Hope Art Center is more than a place for creating art. It's a place for rebuilding lives. Every piece you see tonight is a testament to resilience and the unyielding human spirit." The auction was a resounding success. Sarah's Unbreakable sold for $3,000, bringing tears to her eyes as she realized the impact of her work. David's battlefield painting fetched $5,000, its buyer a retired general who praised the piece's emotional depth. The centerpiece of the evening was Eric's Guardian of Hope. When the bidding began, the room fell silent, the weight of the painting's story resonating with everyone present. James Carter started the bidding at $10,000, and the numbers climbed rapidly. By the time the final bid was placed, $25,000, the room erupted in applause. Eric, overwhelmed by emotion, took the stage to thank everyone. "This isn't just about keeping the lights on," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "It's about keeping hope alive. For me, for Marie, and for every person who walks through our doors." By the end of the night, the fundraiser had raised over $100,000, enough to sustain the center for the foreseeable future. As Eric and Marie stood together, watching the guests depart, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. "This is more than we ever dreamed of," Marie said, her voice filled with awe. Eric nodded, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "And it's only the beginning." The Hope Art Center was thriving in many ways. Walls once bare now showcased art filled with stories of resilience, while the space echoed with laughter, conversations, and the hum of creativity. Yet, within this flourishing environment, Eric found himself haunted by memories he thought he had buried. On a quiet morning, Eric sat alone in the studio. Before him lay a blank canvas, yet his hand trembled, unable to bring the brush to life. The room around him felt suffocatingly still. Flashes of his time in Afghanistan surfaced unbidden. Explosions, shouts, the face of a fallen comrade he couldn't save. Marie noticed his unease as she brought him a cup of coffee. "Eric," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've been sitting here for hours. What's going on?" Eric shook his head, his voice distant. "I thought I'd moved past this, Marie. But it's all coming back. The war, the loss. It's like no matter how much I try to paint, the memories won't let go." Marie knelt beside him, her eyes filled with empathy. "You don't have to fight this alone. Let's talk to someone who can help." Marie reached out to James Carter, who quickly connected Eric with Dr. Angela Warren, a therapist specializing in trauma and PTSD. Their first session was difficult. Eric hesitated to open up, unsure if revisiting his pain would help or hurt. "You've been through unimaginable things, Eric," Dr. Warren said softly, her pen poised over a notebook. "But acknowledging that pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave." Eric nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. "I'm just tired of feeling like I'm still there, in the war. I have a life here, people who depend on me. But some days, it's like I can't breathe." Together, they began exploring coping mechanisms, grounding techniques, journaling, and using his art as a way to process rather than escape his emotions. Just as Eric began to find his footing, the center faced another challenge. One afternoon, Sarah, the single mother who had become an integral part of the community, stormed into Marie's office, her face pale and her hands shaking. "They're trying to shut us down," she gasped, holding up a letter. Marie read the notice in disbelief. It was a formal complaint from a neighboring property owner, Richard Caldwell, claiming the center was disrupting the community. The document threatened legal action if the center didn't cease operations immediately. Eric joined the discussion, his jaw tightening as he read the letter. "Caldwell again," he muttered. "He's been against us from the start." "We can't let him do this," Marie said, her voice firm. "This center means everything to so many people." Determined to fight back, Eric and Marie organized a town hall meeting, inviting community members to share their thoughts on the center. The room was packed, some there to defend the center, others skeptical of its value. Eric stood at the front, his voice steady but impassioned. "This isn't just an art center. It's a place where people find hope when they've lost everything. It's a place where stories are told, lives are rebuilt, and futures are imagined." One by one, participants from the center stood to share their experiences. David, the disabled veteran, said, "This place gave me a reason to get out of bed again. It reminded me that I'm more than what I lost in the war." Sarah added, "I've been able to provide for my child because of the skills I've learned here. This center saved my family." The room fell silent as an elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, shuffled to the front. Her voice was soft but carried weight. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 50 years. I've seen it fall into despair. But this center has brought life back to it. We can't let fear and prejudice take that away." Even some of the skeptics began nodding, their expressions softening. James Carter, who had been quietly observing, rose to address the crowd. His presence commanded attention, and his words carried undeniable authority. "This center isn't just about art," he began. "It's about resilience, about giving people a chance when no one else will. And let me be clear, I will do everything in my power to ensure it stays open." His declaration was met with applause, and the mood in the room shifted. People who had been hesitant began offering their support, donations, volunteer hours, and even legal advice to counter Caldwell's complaint. Amidst the fight to save the center, Eric continued to wrestle with his own demons. Late one night, unable to sleep, he returned to the studio. The blank canvas still sat before him, taunting him with its emptiness. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Instead of pushing the memories away, he allowed them to surface. The sounds of war, the faces of his comrades, the weight of his loss. Slowly he began to paint. Each stroke was deliberate, each color chosen with care. As the hours passed, the canvas transformed into a powerful depiction of a soldier standing amidst chaos, his single arm outstretched to shield a child from the destruction around them. When the painting was finished, Eric stepped back, his chest heaving with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. The legal battle with Caldwell reached a turning point when Linda Grayson published a powerful article highlighting the center's impact. She included interviews with participants, photographs of their artwork, and testimonials from community members. The piece went viral, drawing attention from local leaders and activists. Under public pressure, Caldwell withdrew his complaint. The victory was celebrated with a community gathering at the center, where Eric unveiled his new painting, titled Resilience. As the crowd admired the piece, Marie stood beside Eric, her hand clasping his tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. The challenges had been immense, but they had only strengthened Eric and Marie's resolve. The Hope Art Center wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, a testament to the power of resilience, community, and love. As the evening drew to a close, Eric looked out over the crowd, friends, neighbors, and strangers who had become family. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose that no shadows could diminish. The Hope Art Center was abuzz with activity as Christmas Eve approached. The usually quiet halls now echoed with laughter, the soft hum of carols, and the sound of brushes sweeping across canvases. Marie and Eric had decided to host a special event, the Festival of Light, to showcase the work of the center's participants and raise funds for its future. Eric stood at the entrance of the main hall, watching as volunteers strung strings of warm lights and placed festive decorations around the room. In one corner, Sarah, the single mother, was carefully arranging a display of her paintings, her young son Taylor excitedly chattering beside her. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Marie said, stepping up beside Eric. "To think this all started with a blank canvas." Eric nodded, his gaze sweeping over the room. "It's more than I ever imagined. But tonight has to be perfect. For everyone." The community had come together in extraordinary ways to prepare for the event. Local bakeries donated pastries, musicians volunteered to perform, and neighbors offered their time to help set up. Eric worked tirelessly on his latest piece, determined to create something that would capture the spirit of the center. The painting, titled Beacon of Hope, depicted a lighthouse shining its light over stormy seas, a symbol of guidance and resilience. Marie, meanwhile, coordinated with Linda Grayson to ensure media coverage of the event. "This could be the story that puts the Hope Art Center on the map," Linda said, her camera slung over her shoulder. As the sun set and the first stars appeared in the sky, the center came alive with visitors. People from all walks of life filled the hall, some drawn by curiosity, others by a deep connection to the center's mission. The air buzzed with excitement as guests admired the artwork on display. Each piece told a unique story. David's painting of a battlefield transformed into a garden, Sarah's depiction of her journey as a single mother, and Tyler's crayon drawings of his dreams for the future. James Carter arrived, his presence commanding attention as he mingled with guests and praised the artists. "This isn't just an art exhibit," he said to a group of reporters. "It's a celebration of resilience and the power of community." The highlight of the evening was the auction, where select pieces were put up for sale to raise funds for the center. The room fell silent as Eric stepped up to the podium, his heart pounding. He held up Beacon of Hope, its vibrant colors glowing under the warm lights. "This painting represents not just my story, but the story of everyone here," he said, his voice steady. "It's about finding light in the darkest of times and sharing it with others." The bidding started modestly, but quickly escalated as patrons recognized the significance of the piece. When the final bid came in, $50,000, the room erupted in applause. Eric stood stunned, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Marie squeezed his hand, her eyes brimming with pride. As the evening continued, another painting drew attention, Sarah's depiction of her life as a single mother. The piece was raw and emotional, capturing both the struggles and the unwavering love she had for her son. When the bidding began, Sarah watched nervously, clutching Tyler's hand. To her astonishment, the painting sold for $5,000, a sum that would allow her to secure stable housing and provide for her son. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Tyler tightly. "This is our miracle," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. The event wasn't just about raising funds. It was about building connections. Guests left notes of encouragement for the artists, and participants shared their stories with visitors. One elderly man approached Eric, his hands trembling as he held out a piece of paper. It is my son," he said, showing a faded photograph of a young soldier. "Your work, it reminds me of him." "Thank you." Eric took the photograph gently, his throat tightening. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It means more than you know." As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Eric and Marie found a quiet moment to themselves. They stood in the middle of the now empty hall, surrounded by the remnants of a magical evening. "We did it," Eric said softly, his voice filled with awe. Marie smiled, her hand finding his. "No, Eric, you did it. This was your dream. And now, it's real." Eric looked at her, his eyes glistening. "It's not just my dream anymore. It's theirs. All of theirs." Before leaving, James Carter approached Eric with a small wrapped box. "For you," he said simply, placing it in Eric's hands. Inside was a set of high-quality paints and brushes, along with a note. "Keep creating. The world needs your light." Eric's hands trembled as he read the words. He looked up at James, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything." James smiled, his expression warm. "This is just the beginning, Eric. There's so much more to come." As Eric and Marie walked home through the snowy streets, their hearts were full. The Hope Art Center had not only survived but thrived, thanks to the support of a community that believed in its mission. The lights of their modest apartment glowed warmly in the distance, a symbol of how far they had come. Inside, a small Christmas tree stood in the corner, its handmade ornaments reflecting the joy and gratitude they felt. Eric placed Beacon of Hope in a special spot on the wall, a reminder of what they had achieved and the lives they had touched. Marie wrapped her arms around him, her voice soft. "Merry Christmas, Eric." He smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Merry Christmas, Marie." And to everyone who made this possible, the Hope Art Center, now bustling with activity, had become a sanctuary for many who once felt invisible. Every room echoed with the sounds of creativity, brushes sweeping across canvases, pencils scratching on sketch pads, and the low hum of conversations filled with hope. For Eric and Marie, This was more than a community space. It was the beating heart of a dream that had come to life. Eric stood in the middle of the main hall, observing as participants worked on their pieces. Each person had a unique story, and each piece of art bore the marks of their journeys. There was Sarah, who now painted serene landscapes that symbolized her newfound stability, and David, the disabled veteran, whose bold, abstract works reflected the chaos and order of his inner world. Marie walked up to Eric, her eyes scanning the room. "It's incredible, isn't it? To think this all started with a single painting." Eric nodded, his gaze lingering on a young boy sketching at a corner table. "It's more than I ever imagined. But the real miracle is seeing them find their voices." One of the most inspiring stories was that of Elena, a middle-aged woman who had spent years trapped in an abusive relationship. She found solace in creating delicate, intricate sculptures that mirrored the fragility and strength of her spirit. During an open session, she shared her story with the group. "I used to think I had no way out," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "But when I mold the clay, I feel like I'm piecing myself back together. I'm finding who I am again." The room erupted in applause, and Elena's face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief. Another story came from Marcus, a teenager who had been living on the streets after running away from a broken home. His graffiti-inspired art was bold and defiant, filled with vibrant colors that demanded attention. "Art saved me," Marcus said during a workshop. "I never thought anyone would care about what I had to say. But here, people listen." Eric had embraced his role as a mentor, guiding participants not just in technique, but in finding meaning in their work. One afternoon, he sat with Tyler, Sarah's son, who was struggling to finish a painting of a superhero. "Why can't I get it right?" Tyler asked, his frustration bubbling over. Eric smiled, picking up a spare brush. "Sometimes, it's not about getting it right. It's about letting the story come through." "What does your hero stand for?" Tyler thought for a moment, then dipped his brush into the paint. "He stands for helping people who feel small." Eric nodded. "Then show that. Paint what you feel, not just what you see." By the end of the session, Tyler had created a vibrant piece that he proudly showed to his mother. Despite its success, the Hope Arts Center faced challenges. The initial funds from the auction were dwindling, and the costs of supplies, rent, and utilities loomed large. Eric and Marie spent late nights going over budgets, trying to stretch every dollar. "We can't let this place close," Eric said one evening, his voice heavy with determination. Marie placed a reassuring hand on his. "We won't. We'll figure something out. We always do." News of the center's financial struggles reached James Carter, who immediately organized a high-profile fundraiser. Held at a luxurious downtown venue, the event brought together influential figures from the art world, business community, and media. Eric and Marie were guests of honor, and they used the opportunity to share the center's mission and impact. Eric spoke passionately about the lives being transformed and the importance of art as a means of healing and expression. "When you give someone the tools to create, you're not just giving them supplies," Eric said. "You're giving them hope. You're giving them a voice." The fundraiser was a resounding success, raising enough money to sustain the center for another year and fund additional programs. With the financial strain lifted, the Hope Arts Center expanded its offerings. They introduced classes on different art forms, from photography to pottery, and partnered with local businesses to provide job opportunities for participants. One of the new initiatives was a mural project led by Eric and Marcus. Together, they worked with a group of participants to create a large-scale piece on the side of a downtown building. The mural depicted a phoenix rising from the ashes, symbolizing renewal and resilience. When the mural was unveiled, it drew a crowd of onlookers. News outlets covered the event, highlighting the Hope Art Center as a beacon of change in the community. The center's success brought a sense of fulfillment to Eric, but it also forced him to confront his own struggles. His battle with PTSD hadn't disappeared, and the weight of being a role model sometimes felt overwhelming. One evening, he confided in Marie. "I feel like I have to be strong for everyone. But some days it's hard." Marie took his hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to carry this alone, Eric. Lean on me, on the people who believe in you. That's what this center is about, helping each other." Her words reminded Eric of the community they had built, and he realized he wasn't alone in his journey. As Christmas approached once again, Eric and Marie began planning another event at the center, a celebration of the participants' achievements and a way to welcome new members. Eric stood before the group during a planning session, his voice steady and filled with hope. "This center isn't just about art. It's about telling our stories and helping others find theirs. Together, we can keep building something that lasts." The participants cheered, their faces alight with determination. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, Eric and Marie sat in the empty hall, surrounded by the artwork created over the past year. Marie leaned her head on Eric's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Eric smiled, his gaze fixed on a painting of the lighthouse he had created months ago. "Every day, and I know we're not done yet." Marie squeezed his hand. "Not even close." They sat in comfortable silence, the room filled with the quiet hum of possibilities. The cold December wind whispered through the streets of Chicago, carrying with it memories of nights spent under a blanket of stars and despair. Eric and Marie Harris walked hand in hand, their steps slow and deliberate as they made their way toward the alleys they once called home. The bustling noises of the city faded into the background, replaced by the sound of their breath and the occasional crunch of snow beneath their feet. "This place," Marie said softly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "It feels like another lifetime." Eric tightened his grip on her hand, his gaze fixed on the familiar corners and shadows. "It's where it all started," he replied, "where we found our strength." The couple stopped at the edge of the alley, where they had spent countless nights huddled together, fighting the cold and clinging to the hope of a better tomorrow. Eric pulled out a small package from his bag, a carefully wrapped box containing art supplies and a scarf he had painted with a vibrant pattern of stars and lanterns. "Do you think anyone's still here?" Marie asked, glancing at the dimly lit alley. "Maybe," Eric said, placing the package near a stack of old crates. "And if they are, I hope this reminds them they're not forgotten." As they walked deeper into the heart of their old neighborhood, they encountered faces that were both familiar and new. An elderly man sitting on the same worn bench, where he had once offered Eric and Marie half of his meager meal, looked up at them with wide eyes. "Eric? Marie? Is that really you?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "It's us, Mr. Daniels," Marie said, kneeling beside him. "We've missed you." Tears welled up in the man's eyes as he took Eric's hand in his frail grasp. "You've come so far," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I always knew you had it in you." Eric smiled, his heart heavy with gratitude. "You believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. We owe a lot to you." They spent time catching up with Mr. Daniels, sharing stories of their journey and listening to his updates about the alley's residents. Before leaving, Marie handed him another package, this one containing a blanket and a thermos of hot soup. "Stay warm," she said, her voice tender. "And know, we're always here for you." As they moved from one corner of the neighborhood to the next, Eric and Marie left small gifts and handwritten notes for those who remained. Each note carried a message of encouragement. "You are stronger than you know. Keep fighting, Eric and Marie." At one makeshift shelter, they found a young woman and her daughter shivering under a pile of thin blankets. Marie knelt down, offering them a scarf and a bag of food. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because we've been where you are," Marie said, her voice steady. "And someone once gave us a reason to hope. Now, it's our turn." The young girl clutched the scarf tightly, her small fingers tracing the painted stars. "It's so pretty," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Thank you." Eric crouched beside them, his gaze soft. "Never stop dreaming," he said. "Dreams are what got us out of here." Their final stop was a small park overlooking the lake, where a weathered lighthouse stood as a symbol of guidance and resilience. It was here that Eric had found inspiration for one of his first paintings at the Hope Art Center. They stood in silence, watching the waves crash against the rocks, their breaths visible in the cold air. "This place," Eric began, his voice filled with emotion. "It reminded me that even in the darkest nights, there's always a light." Marie leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now, we get to be that light for others." Eric reached into his bag and pulled out a small canvas, a painting of the lighthouse surrounded by swirling star. He placed it on the bench near the base of the lighthouse, along with a note. "For anyone searching for their light, may this guide you home." As they walked back toward their car, Eric and Marie took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. The cold that once seeped into their bones was now a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of a life rebuilt on love, resilience, and purpose. "I never thought we'd get here," Eric admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "But looking back, every struggle, every moment of doubt, it was worth it." Marie smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Because it brought us here, and it gave us the strength to help others find their way." Back at the Hope Art Center, news of Eric and Marie's visit to their old neighborhood spread quickly. Participants were inspired to take their own steps in giving back, organizing a community drive to distribute food, blankets, and art supplies to those in need. One evening during an open session, Sarah stood before the group, holding one of Eric's paintings. "Eric and Marie showed us what it means to give back," she said. "Now, it's our turn." The participants cheered, their faces alight with determination. Together, they created care packages, each one containing a piece of art, a message of hope, and essentials for surviving the winter. On Christmas Eve, Eric and Marie returned to the Hope Art Center, where a celebration awaited. The hall was filled with laughter, music, and the glow of twinkling lights. Paintings and sculptures created by participants adorned the walls, each one a testament to the power of resilience and creativity. As the evening drew to a close, Eric stood before the group, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This center isn't just a place for art. It's a place for stories, stories of struggle, hope, and triumph. And every one of you is a part of that story." The room erupted in applause, and Eric's heart swelled with pride. He glanced at Marie, who smiled at him with unwavering support. Together, they had come full circle, transforming their pain into purpose and their dreams into a reality that touched countless lives. The streets of Chicago bustled with the energy of a city that never slept. But today, there was a different kind of buzz in the air. It wasn't the usual holiday rush or the steady hum of the working week. Today, the Hope Arts Center was being recognized in a way that no one, least of all Eric and Marie, had ever imagined. The local news had picked up the story, and now it was spreading across the nation. The media had latched onto their journey, sharing the story of the once homeless couple who had not only overcome unimaginable odds, but had gone on to create a place for others to do the same. "What's next for you two?" a reporter asked, her microphone extended toward Eric and Marie as they stood in front of a massive crowd of reporters and cameras. "How does it feel to go from the streets to the national stage?" Eric looked at Marie, his eyes filled with the same quiet resolve that had carried them this far. He took a deep breath before answering. "I think the biggest change is realizing that our story isn't just ours anymore," Eric said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's everyone's. This isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. We want to see others do the same." The flashbulbs of cameras went off as Marie stepped closer to Eric, her hand brushing against his arm in a quiet gesture of solidarity. "For us," she added, "the Hope Arts Center is a dream come true. But it's also the first step in creating a movement that shows how art can heal, how creativity can bring people together, and how everyone deserves a chance to be seen." The story had captivated the nation, and soon after, the Hope Arts Center became the subject of interviews, articles, and even a documentary that followed the journey of Eric and Marie from the streets of Chicago to the forefront of the art world. What had started as a humble community effort had turned into a symbol of resilience, healing, and hope. James Carter's name was once again associated with their success. His contribution to their journey, his belief in their story, in Eric's art, had been pivotal. It was clear that his role as a benefactor had changed the trajectory of not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. "People don't just see art anymore. They see the stories behind it," James said in one interview. "I've always believed that art has the power to change the world, and when you give someone like Eric a chance, you see that potential unfold in the most powerful way." Eric, Marie, and their supporters were invited to speak at national conferences and community forums, where they shared their story and advocated for the importance of art and creativity in the lives of underserved communities. Marie, especially, found herself speaking with a newfound confidence, sharing her thoughts on how art had not only changed Eric's life, but had allowed them to form a family, a community, and a future. The ripple effect of the Hope Arts Center's success went beyond the walls of their gallery. New partnerships began to form as other organizations across the country reached out to learn more about the model that Eric and Marie had created. The couple was invited to visit other cities where they were asked to help develop similar centers for underserved populations. "We never thought we'd be in a position to help others do what we did," Eric said, his voice quiet yet full of conviction. "But if our story can inspire someone else to take that first step, then that's what matters." One of the first cities to reach out was New York, where the nonprofit organization Art for All invited Eric and Marie to collaborate on an initiative that would bring art programs to public schools in low-income neighborhoods. "We've heard your story, and we know that what you've built in Chicago can be replicated here," said the director of Art for All, a woman named Kate Reynolds. "Art is often seen as a luxury, something only for the elite. But your story proves that it's for everyone. It's for survival. It's for resilience. It's for change." Eric and Maria both agreed to take on the project, and soon they were flying back and forth between Chicago and New York, overseeing workshops and meeting with students who were eager to share their own stories through art. But it wasn't just young artists they were mentoring. The couple found themselves invited to meet with other nonprofits, businesses, and foundations that were committed to helping those in need. Each meeting, each conversation, reminded them of why they had started this journey: to create a world where no one had to face the struggles of a homelessness alone, and where the healing power of art could be accessible to everyone. With their success in New York and other cities, the Hope Art Center began to receive funding from larger philanthropic organizations, including major corporations. The center was able to hire more staff, expand its programs, and provide free art supplies and classes to even more people in need. One evening, during a fundraising event, Eric found himself on stage once again, addressing a large crowd of donors and supporters. "As we stand here today," Eric said, his voice resonating through the auditorium, "I can't help but think about how far we've come and how much further we still have to go." The Hope Art Center is not just a place, it's a movement that proves that anyone, no matter their background, no matter their circumstances, can find healing through art. But we need your help. We need your support to make this dream a reality for even more people. The audience applauded, but Eric's words held a weight far deeper than the applause that followed. "Together, we can make sure that no one ever has to feel invisible again," he continued. "Together, we can build a future where art and creativity are not just for the privileged few, but for all." Marie stood beside him, her eyes bright with pride. Together, they had turned their vision into a reality. But their work wasn't done yet. There was still more to be done, more stories to be shared, more lives to be touched. As the evening came to a close, Eric and Marie returned to their hotel room in New York, their hearts full of the possibilities that lay ahead. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. From the cold, desolate streets of Chicago to the grand stages of the art world. Marie sat down on the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning the city lights outside the window. "Can you believe how much has changed?" she asked, her voice a mixture of wonder and disbelief. Eric sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the city below. "Number, I thought we'd just be a couple of forgotten souls. But look at us now. We're not just surviving, we're thriving. And the best part? We're helping others do the same." The couple exchanged a smile, one filled with the quiet joy of knowing that their hard work and sacrifices had paid off, not just for them, but for others who had been given the same chance to rise from the ashes of their struggles. As the night stretched on, they both knew that their journey was far from over. The Hope Art Center was just the beginning. Together, they would continue to spread their light, to inspire others, and to create a world where no one ever had to feel alone in their fight for a better tomorrow. The warm sun of early spring was a welcome contrast to the bitter cold of the past months, marking a new chapter, not just for Eric and Marie, but for the countless lives they had touched. The Hope Art Center had flourished far beyond their expectations, and the momentum was unstoppable. It was a Saturday morning, and the center was buzzing with activity. The walls of the building were lined with vibrant paintings, sculptures, and photographs created by local artists, veterans, single mothers, former homeless individuals, and even children. The air smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread, and soft music played in the background as people came together to create, to share, and to heal. Eric and Marie had spent the past year expanding the reach of their mission. They had hired new staff, including artists who had once been participants themselves, and they were now working with local schools to bring art programs into underprivileged communities. "We've come so far, haven't we?" Marie said, standing by the window that overlooked the center's bustling courtyard. She watched as children painted on easels, their laughter filling the air. Eric walked up beside her, his face a picture of pride. "I can hardly believe it. A year ago, we were just trying to survive. Now, we're giving people the chance to thrive." He paused, taking a deep breath as he observed the vibrant activity around him. "We're creating something bigger than just a place to paint. We're creating a movement, a real change." Marie nodded, her heart swelling with pride. This, this is what we were meant to do. It's all come together exactly as it was meant to. One of the most exciting developments had been the decision to create a large mural that would encapsulate everything the Hope Art Center stood for. Eric had been commissioned to lead the project, and he knew exactly what he wanted the mural to represent: resilience, hope, and community. "This mural is going to be the heart of the center," Eric said one evening, staring at the blank wall where the mural would soon come to life. "It needs to tell our story, and the story of everyone who's been here. Every person who's walked through those doors has their own piece of this." The mural would feature powerful images of strength, images of soldiers, single mothers, children, and people who had overcome the worst life had to offer. It would be a tribute to the survivors, the dreamers, and the fighters. Eric's hands trembled slightly as he began the first strokes of paint, the lines emerging on the wall like memories from his past. It was more than just a project. It was a message to the world. No matter where you come from, you have a place in this story. Marie watched him work, standing back to let him immerse himself in the task. She could see the concentration in his eyes, the way he poured his soul into each brushstroke. This mural was everything. It was not just a symbol of their journey, but the very embodiment of their mission: to give back, to inspire others, and to ensure that art was accessible to all. With the Hope Art Center's success growing, Eric and Marie knew they needed to sustain it for the future. They organized a large fundraising event, which would be the centerpiece of their efforts to ensure that the center could continue to provide free art supplies, teaching programs, and community initiatives. The event was to be held at a renowned downtown venue in Chicago, attracting donors, celebrities, and art enthusiasts from all over the city. The fundraiser would feature a live auction of Eric's paintings, including several new pieces inspired by his mural. The money raised would go directly into supporting the center's expansion, including offering scholarships to young artists who could not afford the supplies or classes. Eric stood on the stage that evening, looking out at the elegant crowd. He had never imagined his work would be seen by so many. A year ago, he had been sitting in the freezing cold, with nothing but his art to keep him going. Now, he was standing before a room full of people who believed in his work, who were willing to invest in it, and, most importantly, in him. As the auction began, Eric's heart raced. The first few paintings were sold for amounts far higher than he had ever dreamed. Each piece carried a story: the story of resilience, the story of love, the story of struggle. And with each stroke, Eric had captured a piece of the human spirit that was being bought and sold in that room. Marie stood by his side, watching with a smile on her face as the bidding soared. It wasn't just the money that made her proud. It was the recognition. It was the way people saw Eric for what he was: a storyteller, an artist, a man whose work transcended the pain of his past. When the event reached its climax, Eric took the stage once more. He wasn't used to speaking in front of large crowds, but tonight was different. He had something important to say. "I'm not here tonight just to talk about my art," Eric began, his voice quiet but strong. I'm here to tell you that art isn't just for the wealthy or for the privileged. Art belongs to everyone. It's for the homeless, for the veterans, for the single mothers, for the children who don't have the resources to buy fancy supplies. His words were met with applause, but he continued, his gaze steady as he addressed the room. This is about community. This is about building something that doesn't just survive, but thrives. It's about giving everyone the opportunity to express themselves, to share their stories. When we support each other, when we invest in each other, we create something that lasts. This isn't just my success. It's all of ours. The room fell silent as Eric's words sank in. For the first time, people began to see not just the artist, but the person whose art had given voice to the voiceless. The event was a success, raising more than enough to support the next year's programs. As the guests filtered out of the venue, the Hope Arts Center team stood together in the lobby, overwhelmed by the support they had received. Marie stood beside Eric, her hand on his shoulder, as they took in the crowd leaving the venue. "We did it," she said softly. "We're going to keep doing it. We've only just begun." Eric nodded, his eyes filled with the weight of their journey. "Yes, but it's more than just us now. It's everyone. We're building something bigger than just a center. We're building a future." As they left the venue together, Marie's arm around Eric, they knew that this was just the beginning. The Hope Arts Center would continue to grow, to inspire, and to offer hope to those who had been left behind. And through it all, Eric's art would continue to tell the stories of those who needed to be heard, one stroke at a time. The snow was falling gently outside, coating the world in a soft white blanket that seemed to make everything feel new again. The world felt quieter on Christmas Eve, as if the season itself was holding its breath, waiting for something miraculous to happen. Inside the Hope Arts Center, however, there was no such stillness. Laughter, music, and the rustle of brushes against canvases filled the air. It was Christmas, and for the first time in a long while, the center was more than just a place of art. It was a home. Eric and Marie stood side by side, taking in the scene before them. The walls were adorned with colorful paintings, sculptures, and photographs created by the people they had helped. The center was alive with the energy of its residents, artists, children, veterans, and single mothers, each person with a story to tell, each one adding a unique piece to the puzzle of this vibrant community. Marie looked around at the faces of those she had come to love and care for, her heart swelling with pride. There was Sarah, the young single mother, whose art had recently been featured in a local gallery, standing with her son Tyler, laughing as he showed off the gift he had made. There was David, the disabled veteran who had found solace in painting after years of suffering from PTSD, now mentoring the younger artists in the center. And there were the children, their faces lit up with the joy of creation, their innocence and energy a stark contrast to the struggles of their lives outside these walls. Marie's eyes met Eric's, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The years of struggle, the cold winters, the homelessness, it all seemed so far behind them now. They had built something beautiful, something lasting. "Look at all of them," Marie said softly, her voice filled with awe. "We've done something good, Eric. Look how far we've come." Eric nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder, as he watched the room full of people who had found a sense of belonging, a sense of hope in the place they had created together. "It's incredible. But it's not just us. It's everyone who's walked through these doors. We couldn't have done it without them." The door to the center opened, and James Carter, the man whose belief in them had changed everything, walked in. He smiled as he saw the two of them standing by the window, taking in the scene they had helped create. "This place looks amazing," James said, his voice rich with admiration. "You've really done something special here." Eric turned to face him, his eyes still filled with wonder at how far they had come. "It's hard to believe sometimes. A year ago, we didn't know how we were going to make it. Now, look at this." James placed a hand on Eric's shoulder, his expression sincere. "This is just the beginning, Eric. What you've done here, what you're doing, it's going to have a ripple effect. It's already inspiring others, and it's only going to grow." Marie smiled at James, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything, James. You believed in us when we didn't even believe in ourselves." James shook his head, his smile warm. "I just helped open the door. You two have done the rest. But don't forget, you're not alone. We're all in this together." As the evening unfolded, the center became a celebration of community, art, and new beginnings. There were speeches, music, and a grand feast. But most importantly, there was the sense of shared purpose, of unity. The people who had once been cast aside by society now had a place to belong. The Hope Arts Center was no longer just a dream. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of resilience, creativity, and love. Eric and Marie moved through the crowd, exchanging hugs, sharing stories, and watching as people from all walks of life connected through their shared love of art. It was a scene they had once only dreamed of, a scene that now felt more real than ever before. As the night drew to a close, Eric stood in front of the large mural that had taken shape over the last few months. It was finished now, a breathtaking work of art that encapsulated everything the Hope Arts Center stood for. The mural depicted people from all walks of life, soldiers, children, mothers, fathers, all linked together by the threads of resilience and hope. Marie joined him, standing quietly beside him, as they gazed at the mural. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Eric smiled, a quiet but deep smile that spoke volumes. "It tells our story. It tells everyone's story." He paused, his gaze never leaving the mural. "I used to think that painting was just something I did to survive. But now, I realize it's more than that. It's my way of giving back. It's my way of making sure no one is forgotten." Marie took his hand, squeezing it gently. "And you're not forgotten, Eric. None of us are." The next morning, Christmas Day, the center hosted a special event for the children in the community. They had spent the entire week preparing, wrapping gifts, and organizing activities. Eric and Marie had saved up enough to give each child a gift, a small piece of art created by someone at the center. It wasn't much, but it was a symbol of the love and care that filled the walls of the center. As the children unwrapped their gifts, their faces lit up with joy and surprise. Some had received small sculptures, others had paintings, but all of them had something personal, something made with love and intention. One little girl named Emma, who had been coming to the center with her grandmother for months, looked up at Eric with wide eyes. "This is for me?" she asked, her voice soft with disbelief. Eric nodded, smiling warmly. "Yes, it's for you. It's a reminder that you matter. Your story matters." Emma clutched the painting to her chest, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you. I'll keep it forever." Eric's heart swelled with emotion as he watched Emma and the other children walk around proudly with their gifts. This was why they had started this journey. This was what it was all for. To make sure no one felt invisible. To give people a reason to believe in themselves again. As the sun set on Christmas Day, Eric and Marie found themselves sitting together in their small apartment above the Hope Arts Center. It was a simple space, but it was theirs. The walls were adorned with Eric's paintings, and the soft glow of their Christmas tree lit the room with a warmth that was more precious than anything they had ever known. Marie rested her head on Eric's shoulder, and they both stared out of the window, watching as the snow continued to fall. The world outside was still, peaceful, but inside, they had created something alive, something that would continue to grow and change, spreading light and hope to all those who needed it. "Do you remember last Christmas?" Marie asked, her voice soft and reflective. Eric nodded, his hand tightening around hers. "How could I forget? We had nothing, but now, we have everything." Marie smiled, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "I think we always had everything. We just didn't know it." Eric kissed her forehead gently. "Yes, we did. And we still do. We have each other." They sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they were ready for it. Together, the glow of the Christmas tree reflected in the window, casting long shadows on the walls of their new home, as outside, the world was blanketed in peace. And in that moment, they knew that the brightest tomorrow had already begun. As the story of Eric and Marie comes to an end, we're reminded of the incredible power of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds that define us as human beings. Their journey is one that transcends struggle, proving that no matter where we start or what we face along the way, there's always room for growth, healing, and the chance to make a difference. But this story isn't over yet. Eric and Marie's journey is just one of many waiting to be told, and we want you to be a part of it. What does hope mean to you? How has art or a simple act of kindness changed your life? Let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts and continue this conversation with you. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories, moments of triumph, and real-life inspiration coming your way. Stick with us, because the best is yet to come. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, let's continue spreading light, one story at a time.